You have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV.
Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Hey everybody, Ken Reid here, your TV guidance counselor. On the show, TV guidance counselor, we are back. We're back, even though we didn't go anywhere. We're here each and every week talking about classic television using back issues of TV Guide magazine from my personal collection as the gateway into our collective pasts. This week is an exciting one for me. Aside from the fact that I've been locked in my house for 3.5 months and have completely lost my mind. But this guest is someone I've wanted to talk to for ages and oddly have talked to all of his friends and coworkers pretty much, but I've never really had a chat with him, even though we both technically appeared on the same edition of the Dana Gould Hour a few years ago as a Halloween edition. My guest is Joel Hodgson. You probably best know Joel from Mystery Science Theater 3000. And in the past, I've had TV's Frank on, I've had Trace Blue, I've had Jonah Ray, I've had Mary Jo Pehl, and good friends of Joel's Dana Gould and Nell Scoville. So it's sort of completing the set, everybody. I've collected all these people. But this was a fun chat. I love Joel. I've been a big fan of his since the pre-Mystery Science Theater days when I saw his stand-up on television. He is just great. TV Wheel was a fantastic pilot he did. He appears on Freaks and Geeks. Just really good stuff. And I had a really good time chatting with him in these remote sessions. Speaking of everything else in remote sessions, I hope you guys are still doing okay. Please let me know. Email me at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or ken@icanread.com. You can message me on Twitter or Instagram at Kenneth W. Reid or at TV Guidance. Again, things are tough and they seem to be getting worse for everyone. So, I will be here doing this the best I can as long as I can. And I hope that it helps you. I do want to mention, if you're looking for something just nice to unplug with, if you haven't watched Joe Pera Talks With You, the Adult Swim show, definitely do it. There's 2 seasons and a couple of specials. Joe Firestone, friend of the show and friend of mine, is an executive producer and on the show and writes the show. Ted and Pete hate her. They're just yelling about her. But it's a great, fun, it's a little bit sad, but it reminds me of Pete and Pete. It's really smart and slow and sweet and funny show that I highly recommend you watch. If you just want to watch one episode, watch the Joe reads the church announcements and then you'll be hooked. I guarantee you. Anyway, enough of my plugs. Not hair plugs. If there's one thing I don't need, it's hair plugs. Have you seen me? Ooh, what a glorious head of hair I have. It's maybe the only thing I got from my parents that is genetically nice. Yeah, I'm just babbling now because that's what happens. And weirdly is sort of what Joel talks about here, that sort of broadcasting alone into the abyss as an inspiration for Mystery Science Theater 3000. And, he's not wrong. You just talk here and you sort of intellectually know that people are listening, but you don't really, since it's a one-sided conversation, it's just you and a microphone, it does sort of feel like you're just talking to nobody. Actually, this is sort of like Mystery Science Theater 3000 if you replace the robots with my dogs, which I guess that Ted would probably be, I guess Gypsy, Pete would probably be Crow, and then I guess that would make Larry Tom Servo. It's not really a one-to-one. It doesn't really work, but think of it that way. That's the best way you could think about it. And I think that makes sense. And, you could probably tell me anything right now and it makes sense. Let me know how you're coping. Also, if you have suggestions for people you'd like me to have on the show, or somebody who you think would be a good guest, a celebrity or whatever, let me know. You can tweet me, as I said, at Kenneth W. Reid or at TV Guidance or tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or ken@icanread.com. Some people are more open to these things now that they're remote and they don't have to invite me over their house or look at my face in person or come to my weird house. But I'm trying, and I can scan TV guides and I can talk to them via whatever remote, I guess, program they prefer. So looking for your suggestions. Love to have them. Anyway, speaking of loving to have them, this guest is someone I loved having on. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, Joel Hodgson.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Appropriately live via satellite, Joel Hodgson. How are you, sir?
Hey, hi, Ken. Thanks for having me. I don't know if you heard that, but that's a soda water I'm opening.
Okay.
Get ready.
I thought you were cracking a big tall beer, a Schlitz.
Oh, man. That would be so cool. I can't justify it just yet.
No.
It's about 4 o'clock.
Yeah, and it's not 5 o'clock here, if it is 5 o'clock somewhere, despite the lockdown. And I hear your printer furiously printing away some pages from this TV guide.
Yeah, it just, I had a lot of fun looking at it, and I printed up some of my favorite pages. I'll be using that as a reference.
You asked me for an issue from 1968, so I gave you the week of August 31st to September 6th, 1968, very end of the summer here. And I actually enjoyed going through this one too, because I don't get to look through the 60s ones that much.
Yeah, I think I was just kind of hoping that there'd be some things, because that's when I was really watching a lot of TV and really involved with with the world of TV Guide. And I don't think we ever had TV Guide at our house. I would have loved it, but I think we always used the one that came in the newspaper.
Here's a weird correlation I've noticed, and this may be true for you as well. Did you have a toaster or a toaster oven?
Toaster.
Okay, so you've gone against the trend I found. For some strange reason, I would say 95% of people who use the free one in the TV Guide had a toaster oven, and I don't know why those two things are connected.
That's great. Yeah, no, we had a toaster, but again, I'm 60, man, so it's kind of like we're going way back.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody had a toaster. I'd be shocked if anyone had a toaster oven in 1968. I mean, they'd be, other than your unfeasibly rich listeners.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well have had a butler if you have a toaster oven.
That's right.
So
and that's what we call our butler, toaster oven.
Toaster oven, T.O.
They really degraded them back then. They just, right off the bat, you didn't get a name like Jepson or something like that. You were toaster oven.
You were some sort of major appliance. And toaster oven was one of the better ones. You could have been fridge or dishwasher. It would have been rough. Or the ever unpopular humidifier. The first thing I noticed in this one, and I don't know if you took a look at the articles at the beginning here, but there's actually a really fascinating piece by Isaac Asimov.
Yeah, that was the first thing I noticed. I read his Foundation trilogy when I was in junior high, and it was kind of over my head, I think.
Yeah.
I've always had an aversion to Isaac Asimov, and but this was really great. And he did a really cool article about The Prisoner.
Yeah, of all things.
It really knocked me out, and just kind of was a very interesting article, and it kind of showed you how TV Guide at the time was really trying to survey TV, but also the higher mind of television, which is kind of shocking for 1968. So he has a very lucid, really cool review of. He basically, as you remember, he starts with talking about how every time your hero in every single show must win at the end. And he does a calculation, right? Mm-hmm. Of how many times that is. I think he does something. He talks about Perry Mason, Maxwell Smart, Marshall Dillon, and he's counting up every show. He said something like 42,000 times the hero of the movie always wins. Except for The Prisoner.
Right. Andy points out that shocked me is The Prisoner I always think of as like a weird cult show, but it was actually really popular for when it was on. And the whole sort of thesis of his article is that this show shouldn't be popular because it's so weird. And so maybe that's why it is popular.
I agree. And, before The Prisoner was a show called Secret Agent Man.
Yes.
Which was Patrick McGowan as well. Had that great theme song. And it kind of set the stage for The Prisoner, which was much more sophisticated. And I remember I didn't really get into The Prisoner when it came out. This would have been over my head. I was 8. So I didn't really get into The Prisoner till I was in college. And they were doing The Prisoner on public television in Minneapolis when I was at college. And there was also great TV on public television, obviously, like Python, right?
Mm-hmm.
And same with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the TV show, and Doctor Who. And all those shows had a huge impact on me with MST3K, especially The Prisoner. The idea that if you're inhibited from the outset, what do you do?
Right. It wouldn't be maybe the most obvious influence on the show, but it makes perfect sense.
I just always loved that show. And I think it's very stylish. It's really, the art direction's is so sound for a show like that. And same with that crazy, like, Rover, right? The bubble.
For people that don't know, it's like a big gelatinous weather balloon.
Yeah, and it comes out of the ocean, and Rover comes when you try to leave the island. Anytime you try to escape the island, Rover comes. And it does this thing where, and it makes a noise, and it kind of emerges out of the sea, and it comes for you, and it covers you, but then you're getting the impression that you ultimately get sealed inside, and it could roll away with you.
Yeah.
And kind of bring you somewhere. And it was so effective, and man, it was really special. The whole thing was really special. So that was a really nice surprise in this right off the bat, that there was, something like that in TV Guide 1968.
Yeah, and that was sort of the main differentiator, I guess, between the free one and the newspaper, which really was just literally a guide of what's on and what TV Guide had to offer. And I think they intentionally sort of tried to up their game to get you to buy the magazine, literally to read the articles, because there was no nudie shots like Playboy. So they got to get you to read something, and those articles are great, especially around this time. Right? There's also Eleanor Roosevelt wrote an article around this time for TV Guide. Like, it's just crazy. In this thing.
There's an article here, and it may be the front page, where they go, read by over 12,500,000 families. Mm-hmm. So that's a startlingly huge number for a magazine. Yeah. So if a magazine about watching TV was maybe have been the biggest magazine in the world. Again,
it's still around technically, but people forget about it. And the thing I love about it is it was written to be 100% disposable, which is why it's the best sort of time capsule that you could imagine.
Mm-hmm. It's great. It's really great.
So did anything pop out at you on the first day there on Saturday night?
You mean when I looked at it?
Yeah. What you would watch?
Well, I think for me, a lot of the things that attract me about TV Guide are the graphics in it, and I always love those. This particular one doesn't have a lot of ads for shows,
right? And
that's what I remember the most. Is kind of like. They'd run ads for Gilligan's Island, the local TV channel, and there'd be these kind of cool collaged ads. This one has a few, but they're not that interesting. Like, they'll do a close-up, and there'll be a golf tournament. Right. So I think it's a men's amateur golf championship in Columbus, Ohio, and they're showing you the layout of the golf, like the golf course. Right. It's like a little drawing. It's a little map. And so there'd be moments like that. And then there's a United States, the close-up articles where they kind of would try to steer you to the best programming. Like, this close-up is about Wide World of Sports. And I don't know. I mean, to me, I'm always, print is so fascinating the further you go back in time, because it's more mysterious, I think, because now, we could pretty easily in Photoshop reconstruct TV Guide and make our own funny TV guide, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And recreate this, but it was a bit mysterious how these things all got put together. And I still don't quite know how they did it on a local level, because this is one that comes from the Boston area.
Yes, yep.
And so it's amazing to me because they seem to have offices all over. With 12,500,000 families looking at it, it seems like it had. I mean, the offices were. I live outside of Philadelphia, and the offices were not far from here.
Yeah, and that was the core. It's a fascinating story of, much like breweries, or actually parallels very close to the wrestling, to regional wrestling. Mm-hmm. There were sort of local unrelated TV guides in various cities. Some were called different things like TV Week or TV Forecast, and the Philadelphia TV Guide slowly bought them all until 1955, when they brought them all under one umbrella, but they kept the regional offices in each town as well. So it was almost like the network model, where you have a network pumping out the main programming, but then they let the local affiliate sort of fill in the rest. And it was a really weird model for a magazine. I don't think there were any other magazines that did that. Even newspapers were, there wasn't national headquarters for newspapers with local affiliates.
Yeah, because just juggling all this data for an individual market is crazy. 7:30 News with Joseph Benty.
Yeah.
Then Bozo the Clown, then Paul Gumont with the news, then Cisco Kid. And it's like every single market is different.
Yeah, and especially with the production time in 1968, because they were pretty much like hand cutting and pasting this stuff into the print.
Amazing.
Yeah, to be able to get that with any sort of accuracy is pretty impressive, I must say.
So the things I picked out right away is I just started. I never really start at the front of anything. I just kind of go to the middle like everyone else and look around. I really truly was like a TV junkie when I was a kid. I was one of those kids that would get up and watch TV before school, get home from school and watch TV. Usually I could pick up the movie that was started at 3:30. And if that was any good, I could watch that until about 5. And then you pick up like Hogan's Heroes or something. And then it's almost dinner time.
Right.
And then after dinner, it's this whole other world where it's a little more splashy. And you've got, your kind of, mainstream shows. But I was one of those kids that would get up early and just start watching TV. And so I'm looking at a Thursday morning, and they had summer semester, which I couldn't manage. It was so dull.
Right. Because who wants to watch school in the summer?
Yeah, and it was always really sophisticated stuff, and I just couldn't follow it. And then I do remember, I grew up in Wisconsin, so the farm report was a big thing, and there would be a farm report, and it would really be, it's really truly TV for farmers eating breakfast and getting ready to go out. And it was all about pork futures and, just kind of projections about crops and stuff like that. And then they'd sell, the ads were about tractors. They'd try to, like, I remember International Harvester was a big name for a tractor, and they'd run ads for tractors and they'd run ads for feed.
Yeah.
So they'd have ads, and there'd be ads about feed that you would feed your cows that supposedly help them produce more milk. And it was real weird. Two things to get exposed to that.
Yeah, I mean, two things that pop out about that is you have an 8-year-old kid watching a farm report, which was perfectly logical at the time, because I, like you, would, if your other option was you don't watch TV, you're not going to do that. So you're going to watch whatever's on. And then we didn't have the farm report here in the Boston area. So as a huge SCTV fan, with the farm film Blow Up sketch where they that was
so
extra weird to me. Like when I was watching that, I didn't even get that the farm report aspect of it was a real thing they were parodying.
Oh, it really was. And then, but I think too, for kids, it's just, I think a lot of times you're trying to survey what adults are doing and what's like important, and you're kind of prepping. You're kind of saying, is this something useful? Is this something I need to know? I do not know, but I should probably watch it. There's probably something here.
Yeah.
And so there is kind of that thing where a lot of times when you're a kid and you're watching TV, especially back then, you're kind of hoping, you're always just curious, like how does it all work, and what will people expect of me when I'm an adult, and how am I going to play it? And so I think you're spending a lot of time like observing people and kind of wondering, am I going to be called upon to do a farm report?
Right.
Will they expect that of me? Should I be paying attention?
Someone's just going to on the spot be like, what are hog futures today? Hey, I didn't pay attention.
Get in there. You've just been selected. You've been selected to read the farm report.
To farm report.
And then I'm kind of looking at, again, I feel like this market had way more options than where I was in Wisconsin. Where I was in Wisconsin, there really were maybe 4 channels and a UHF channel and a public channel. So it really might have been 5 things. And so it was really easy to just do a really quick kind of breeze through the 5 channels, like clicking through them,
right,
to kind of quickly decide how you wanted to spend your time. And again, this is before you could record anything. And so you really had to be sitting there when it came through your TV. You couldn't really, set a timer on a VCR or anything. And so it was a really different, kids back then had a really different relationship with the TV than they do now, because you can kind of conjure anything. If you even use a TV, most kids use their phones.
And I wonder, like, you come from the sort of that first generation of TV kids, the tail end of it, that grew up watching TV and then started making art. And it's fascinating to me because those of us that grew up in the pre-VCR world, we paid much more attention to the things that we watched because you never knew if you would see it again. So
it's really true. Yeah,
it's locked in there. And so I think we really started to see, like, in that, especially that first stand-up boom, that's when you really started to see stand-ups and especially comedians who usually were all latchkey kids for other reasons, really start referencing this stuff. And that's when we started to see it get sort of to churn back into like this second wave.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. It's true. And I don't know, it's just all a mystery. Like, how did any of it work? How did any of it, like, the local ads were composite of things that you could buy at a local store, mm-hmm. and also events that were happening. And it was all it was very, it was much more location centric. I think when you mentioned breweries or like the way craft breweries are now, mm-hmm. Local TV stations were, I think. Yeah. And so yeah, it felt like they were they were affiliates, so they were showing a fair amount of content that was like national, but then there was a fair amount of time, almost up until around 6:00 at night, where it would be their primetime shows, but they could kind of fill it with a lot of local TV. And that was more meaningful to me as a kid, because I wanted to know how TV was made. And you could drive through our town, you could drive through Green Bay, and you could kind of see where it was made and kind of go, oh yeah, that, like there was a horror host in Green Bay. His name was Alexander, and he had a show called Eerie Street. and he was on WFRV, and you'd drive by there, and I'd look in the parking lot and go, I wonder where Alexander parks. I wonder where his car is, and I wonder, what he's doing. And so it kind of started to be the beginning of trying to understand how you do it. How do you make TV?
Yeah, because it managed to localize it in a way that, Wisconsin and, even Boston here felt likely a million miles away from New York and L.A., where you think of them making movies. But to your point, television, even though we are getting those national things, does have a local element, and it doesn't seem necessarily smaller than the other stuff on TV. And like that season 0 of MST, you were doing that at a local affiliate.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the other thing I'm looking at is Bozo the Clown, which I think really fits in this conversation, because Bozo the Clown had a really unique attitude, because they basically licensed the show to all these local markets. Like Boston had a really vibrant Bozo the Clown. Mm-hmm. Chicago had a really vibrant Bozo the Clown, and I think Dallas, Texas did. And they had one even in little towns, like when I was in first grade, my dad was finishing up his schooling, and we were in Duluth, and there was a Bozo the Clown at the Duluth channel, which is a really little market, and it was a really kind of shitty Bozo the Clown.
right.
But still, they found a way to license it from Larry Harmon, and he somehow had these scenes going on in all these markets. Of course, the biggest one was Chicago, right?
Yes.
Bob Bell and all that.
Chicago and Boston were like the rivals. And to put a finer point on it, it wasn't just that it was syndicated. It was like a franchise, like McDonald's. Like you bought like the costume and the rights to the shtick.
Yeah, and Larry Harmon would make, they'd produce those cartoons.
Yep.
And wasn't Carol Spinney part of the Boston? Didn't he come out of Boston?
He
Bozo?
Did. He did a lot of the puppeteer stuff. Actually, my dad and my uncle were on Bozo in 1963, and my dad always talked about it. And I found the episode. And
holy cow.
It was such dumb luck. It was like 5 episodes in of me reviewing them, and I found it. And at the end of the episode, my 6-year-old dad and my 3-year-old uncle are dancing with a robot to a song called Chicken Curry. And wow. Carol Spinney is the robot.
Oh my God, that's amazing. And I've seen footage of that Boston Bozo, and it was really well produced. It was really pretty lavish, and in some ways it was out finessing the Chicago Bozo, but I just think Bozo in Chicago is such a big market.
Yeah.
And I think, and then there were those people that got involved with the Bozo in Chicago, like Marshall Brodeen, who did TV Magic Cards, and Marshall Brodeen was Wizzo the Magician, mm-hmm. and he was involved, and Bob Bell, who was, of course, the Bozo there. I think I'm getting his name right, Bob Bell. I think it's something correct. Like that. Yeah, and so that was also a little bit of a way in for me, like growing up. Being that one year we were in Duluth, and I knew that they were making Bozo the Clown at the TV station. You drive by it and you go, okay, yeah, I get it. It's not, the mystery of TV isn't that distant. If I can see places, if I can see the physical place where the shows emanate from,
right,
I'm that much closer to it. And so that identity was really important. And so with MST, that was really where I started, because the premise of the premise of MST was really, how do you make a really funny comedy show? It's also the cheapest show in the world.
Right.
What is the cheapest possible show you could do, and it would still have some kind of still have some kind of
production value or
continuity creatively, and comedically. And so I kind of went to that premise, which really was local TV, and really started with, well, what I remember are either kids shows or monster movie shows. Because in the local market in Green Bay, there was Eerie Street, and Alexander was a vampire, but he didn't talk much. He didn't really, I don't even know if he ever said anything. I think they just kind of show him, and he was a bearded guy, and he was laughing, and he was a vampire, and there was a sign that said Eerie Street that was really well made. It looked like art directed, so somebody knew what they were doing. Scary music, and then the movie would just start. And there wasn't a lot there. There was another really great show though that was called TJ and the Ant. So it's television jockey and the all-night theater.
So instead of a VJ, it was TJ?
Yeah, and he was like Jerry Todd from SCTV. He really was like in the control room, running the video and talking. And I believe his name is Doug Heyman, and he's a guy who's still really active doing video, wildly inventive man. And I've gotten to know him over the years since then, and he's a wonderful guy. And he was a big influence on me too, and I really was fascinated with what he was doing as well. And it was that same idea though. He was isolated, he was alone, right? And he was he was making the show alone, and I was alone. You know what I mean? He was broadcasting alone, and it had this kind of vibe that I really liked. And so that's what I was trying to emulate with MST. That
was the vibe you got in those late night hours as well, or the fringe times, as you put it, the time between the network stuff, which the kid shows early in the morning or after the news, and the stuff late at night. And it is interesting. I used to say it all the time about the show. The show's sort of at its core about us being alone together, which has been stolen and co-opted about COVID-19 from me.
Right.
But it really is that thing where it's someone broadcasting sort of into the ether. And especially in the pre-cable days, it felt almost magical that you were sort of pulling this down from the sky and into your house.
Yeah, I got a little bit too from FM radio at the time, again in Green Bay. And when I was about in 7th or 8th grade, there was this kind of movement called album-oriented rock, right? And basically, it was all the really great artists were making great records and weren't quite as concerned about making pop hits because they could sell an album rather than a 45. And so there was this kind of, it seemed like there was this kind of pivotal shift to albums. And it could have been because of the Beatles, obviously, because they'd make such great albums. I think the thinking prior to that was you have one great song on an album, and that made you buy the song, and the rest weren't that great. But at a certain point, albums kind of became this environment that you would turn on, and they started to have these kind of underground FM radio stations, and WIXX was the underground radio station in Green Bay. And it was kind of magical because we'd listen to it at night, and you were alone with this guy, and he would play these cool records, and you'd learn new things, and sometimes they'd be kind of casual with you, and sometimes they were formal, but it just gave you this feeling that was like nothing else in the spectrum of broadcast. It was kind of a new, it was kind of like a new feature that was really, really profound for me. And it just became this kind of model. But I think I started with the idea of a guy who's isolated and the first idea for MST was a thing called You Are Here, which was kind of based on like the Omega Man. You know that movie?
Oh,
right?
my favorite.
Yeah, it's like a great movie, and there's that moment. It's like an early zombie movie, really, and there's a virus, and people become these kind of zombies that only come out at night.
Or also like a weird religious cult.
Yeah, and Anthony Zerbe's in it, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Anthony Zerbe's in it, and Charlton Heston is the only guy who doesn't have this virus, and so the scene that I was borrowing from was that thing where he's watching Woodstock and he's going, "Look at all the people."
Yeah, every
and
day.
It was like,
for people who don't know, every day he sort of drives to a theater in downtown LA and spools up Woodstock because it's like the last movie that played there, and just watches it alone in the theater.
And it's filled with people, and that's what he misses more than anything, right?
Right.
And so my idea was to do a TV studio. So it's similar to the radio station idea. It's a TV studio after the apocalypse. And this guy is broadcasting, and he has a robot, right? Mm-hmm. So that was kind of where the robot thing came from, is like he's got a robot, and he's broadcasting these movies, right? And then when I'm drawing all that stuff, I draw the silhouettes, so like the theater seats, and that was kind of your method of watching it with them. And they'd sit and riff and talk during the movie, right? Mm-hmm. So that was the idea. And so that was kind of sitting there, and probably, I would say it was probably about halfway finished at that point, the idea. And then I think when I finished it was when I met Jim Mallon, who was working at a local TV station, and he approached me. I'd met him years earlier, but he approached me and said, "Oh, we're producing content here at this local channel. We're doing a dance show, and we're going to do like a comedy show. Like we're going to do a comedy competition, right? Like the Gong Show."
Yeah.
And so I went away from that conversation going, "Oh, great! There's a guy locally." And I had just gotten done having my career as a stand-up. So I was like a stand-up on Letterman and Saturday Night Live and the Young Comedian special on HBO. So I kind of had the most chops of any comedian in Minneapolis. I actually had the most hype there. So I kind of knew I could get a show going. Mm-hmm. I kind of was the most famous one. So I went back to this idea and I said, I don't know if I can make a zombie apocalypse that fun. I'm not sure. So then I transposed Silent Running over the top, which is a Douglas Trumbull movie.
Bruce Dern?
And that's with Bruce Dern and three robots, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. And so that kind of fit really good. And so that kind of became the idea of how to do movie riffing. You know, how do you register that in the context of a show? But that meant it was all like about public domain movies. That's the only way I thought this would work. So my idea was, I knew that Plan 9 from Outer Space was a public domain movie, or Robot Monster. So I figured all these movies would be those kind of movies. And that's why it was the cheapest show ever made, because you wouldn't have to license the movies.
Right.
So that was kind of the starting point for it, the starting position. But it did all it really did spring from that local TV model, because on a national level, it was still very heady when I was doing my stand-up. I mean, I started doing stand-up professionally in 1982, and there really wasn't cable then at all. There was really just network TV, and everything was still really high-end. So they only wanted really famous people in TV at that time.
Right.
And so it was kind of crowded with that. And so there wasn't an easy way in yet.
And this
but
was
cable kind of took care of that.
This was even pre when every stand-up on Earth was getting their own show. That hadn't happened yet to set the stage for people.
It was starting to. There were that was a part of the formula when you were a stand-up. I think when I was a stand-up at the Comedy Store, there were people like getting handed sitcoms. So I remember Jim Carrey and I started at the same time, and he was kind of unbelievable as a stand-up. I don't know if you ever saw him, but
he was
really scary talented. And so they were like latching onto him so quickly. And within like a few months, he had a sitcom. It was called The Duck Factory.
Right, which was based on Jay Ward's Bullwinkle company.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and so he got a sitcom, and then and then it just happened. So he was then doing movies, and that was it. But I think Roseanne came out of that.
Yeah, 88 was Roseanne. Roseanne was really the first big one I can think of, because you had like obviously Cosby, less said the better, but he was an institution by the time the Cosby Show came on. They were. It really was this
this really was this great device for TV executives to go into a comedy club, and if a comic was making a room full of people laugh, then the executives felt comfortable, like, oh yeah, let's build a show around them. We understand that they are funny,
right?
Because we just saw them do well. So it kind of made it easier for them. I got offered a couple of shows, but I just ultimately, I read for the Woody part in Cheers.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I am.
Wow.
That's how old I am. And I should have known I wasn't going to get it because I'm not named Woody, right? I should have known.
It was required, yeah.
Yeah, so I did that, and I also got offered a show called High School USA, which was a Michael J. Fox vehicle. Yeah, they made that twice. It was a made-for-TV movie the first time, and the second time they did a pilot as a made-for-TV movie with slightly recast. And if I'm remembering, the sort of premise of that was you have new sort of hot high school students, and then people that like boomers would know from sitcoms from the 50s who were like the teachers there. Yeah, to me, when I read the pilot, it really felt like it was reacting to Animal House. It really felt like a made-for-TV Animal House with high school kids. Right, which there was an Animal House TV series. Yes, it came out, I think it came out the same time. Right. It was the same thing, but I didn't want to do it. I didn't think it was funny. I didn't think I was cast right, and I passed on it. And that's right when I was getting out of kind of being in Hollywood. And this is prior to doing MST by about a year or two. Right. Oh, and they must have, it must be the Crispin Glover role was probably the one that you read for. I think. I don't think so. I think it was the other one. There was like, it was like the guy from Meatballs, the fat guy. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. So again, it was kind of like I wasn't quite the fat guy. I wasn't quite Crispin Glover. I think it was just they were going, oh, this guy's will speak to the youth. We'll just pop him in there. Right. He's a like punk rock comic. Okay. Like he's singing today's hits. Put him in there. They'll love it. This makes sense to them. It didn't feel right. Like I could just kind of feel it like they don't know what they're doing, and this isn't going to be good for my career. And back then, I think back then, because you really only had one shot, there wasn't so many multiple paths you could take like you can now. You didn't want to do the stupid thing. You didn't want to really be a part of a bad show. It wasn't like okay. Right, because like, you would get blamed for it in a lot of ways because you're the face of it. Yeah, and no one. It just was this thing where I think I just felt like very, very responsible for what I was doing. I had a really weird experience when I was on SNL, and it was so strange because I got to know Joe Piscopo, right? So I was doing SNL, like they would put comics. Basically, they would rotate in
Stephen Wright, Penn and Teller.
Stephen Wright, Penn and Teller, Harry Anderson, and me.
Yep.
And so I did like 4 of them. I don't know how many the other guys did.
And this was in the non-Lorne Michaels years, right? Like 80 to 85.
Right. This was Dick Ebersol. Dick Ebersol was doing it, who was a sports producer.
Yeah.
And so he was doing it. It was having a hard time. And they were to the point where they're just saying, well, we're going to roll in these variety acts to kind of be comedy in a comedy show.
Right.
And so I remember like visiting with Joe Piscopo, and he's he has a reputation now as such a strange man.
Yes.
And at that time, he wasn't that way. He was just kind of this utility, shortstop sketch guy.
Right. He was like their Phil Hartman for.
He really was. Yeah, he really was. And he came up to me and he just was shaking his head and he says, "You're so lucky." And I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You get to do your own stuff." He goes, "Look at this." He goes, "I have to go out there and do this whether it's funny or not."
Right.
And it was like, and that was the thing that everyone wanted to avoid. You wanted to avoid, like, I was lucky, he was right. I always got to do my own thing. And doing a show like High School at USA, where it's this giant production that you really couldn't control. Like I would have had no power, right?
Right.
Because I'm a newcomer. And if it wasn't funny, I would just be on it, and that's it. And it could ruin your career, right?
Yeah, you couldn't
did the
be
wrong
like,
thing.
You couldn't be like, let me try a few things. Like people, I think, are much savvier now, but especially then, I don't think people were able to separate the performer from the team of people behind that thing.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
If it was bad, it's you did it.
It's really true. And so I had more of a kind of Puritan attitude about it, where I just said, no, I'm just going to stick with my own stuff because I'm a little, and on top of that, I'm not an actor. I don't really see myself as a person who can become characters. I just know I'm not.
Right.
And so that wasn't the right thing for me to do. So I think I just saw it as, that's the only way I can get this to work, because I'm not sure I can talk executives into seeing what I'm seeing.
Right.
And so going to Minneapolis, going to Minneapolis, hanging out, just being with my friends, kind of got out of comedy, really. I probably took a year off and just tried to think about what I wanted to do. And then this idea, actually, what happened was Seinfeld came to town and we were friends, and I hung out with him and we were talking, and he said, "You know what? I just got asked to do my first HBO special. I'd like you to help me write the interstitials, right? Mm-hmm. The stuff between the stand-up." And so that really changed things for me, is working with him and kind of moving into that world of being a writer, not having to be responsible for performing and selling my ideas, but having ideas as a writer for him to perform.
Which is fascinating, because it's sort of the opposite of what Piscopo said to you, in that you're not doing your own stuff, but you're making other people's own stuff better, if that's a way to say it.
Yeah. I mean, and I found I really enjoyed it. I love supporting other people and kind of helping them and listening to them about what they want to do and offering, it's like, it's kind of relaxing, actually, because you don't have to sell it and believe it. And so I found that really refreshing. And it made me go, man, I kind of like this. I think maybe I want to do this more. And I started to develop an idea that was a movie for Seinfeld, which was a science fiction comedy. And I pitched it to him, and he just said, "This isn't a show for me. This is a show for you." Right? Because you think about Seinfeld, you don't think science fiction, right?
No.
And it's the opposite, right? it's a button down guy observing his world, right?
Microfiction.
And so that was really interesting. And then I started to think, oh yeah, if I could figure out a way to do a show locally, I could have the autonomy to make it the way I wanted to, and there'd be less stress because it would be a local show, and then in success we could sell it nationally.
Right.
And so that was kind of the idea, is that kind of moving to Minneapolis, being there and trying to make a show locally. And if it had legs, if it worked enough, we could go back to Hollywood or go back to New York and say, here's an idea, and I know that it's funny, and I've demonstrated that people like it. Because that's always the hardest part, is how do you talk an executive into believing that what you have to offer is good enough for a mass audience? That's the hardest, craziest thing in the world. I don't know how people do it.
Right, because you're not convincing them to like a thing, you're convincing them that other people like it. And if they might not even understand it or know why.
It's so true. It's so true. And again, it's going to sound abstract to people listening now, because you can just make stuff and put it out anywhere, put it on your Facebook page and make content, or Instagram. And that's what so many people are doing now. And it's immediate. You can find an audience right away. But back then it was very mysterious, and it was mostly because of the cost of production. The cost of making was expensive, but it was going down at a really opportune time, to the point where this local TV station, KTMA in Minneapolis, had an edit bay and had cameras and had nice enough equipment so we could make a show, and we could actually get it kind of getting it to a certain point.
It never occurred to me till you've described it this way either, but it sounds like a crazy way to get a national show. But if you think about it, it's the exact path that local bands do. You do good quality stuff locally till it gains a local audience, and then you hit national, and then you might get a major label to back it and spread it nationally. Like that's how it worked. And so it's weird that it would seem odd to do that in TV, and you're the only example I can think of that sort of used that same model.
Well, I know, man. And it was like, it worked that way for stand-up too, because I did stand-up, I don't know, probably for a solid year in Minneapolis before I went to LA. So I was headlining clubs by the time, I mean, I bet you I did it for 2 years. Probably I started, I guess, or maybe a year and a half, but I started in Minneapolis. And by the time I left, I was headlining and closing the shows in these local comedy clubs. Now, when I went to LA, I had a really good 20 minutes. I basically took the very best pieces of my 45-minute closing act, and I had a nice, tight 20-minute act. And so that's what you did when you showcase at the Comedy Store or at the Improv. And what was weird was when I'd meet people who said, no, I'm not going to mess around with the local markets. I'm coming out and starting out here in LA.
I want to have nothing.
And you just go, don't do that. Like, what are you thinking?
I'm not going to write any songs or practice. I'm just going to go out there and do it.
I got to be a scene maker first. I'm going to get involved with drugs, and that'll help me.
Right. I'll have really good hair.
Yeah, it's true. And so it's true. And, stress is kind of the enemy of creativity, and creativity is designed to relieve stress, but it's kind of like you have to avoid stress to really be creative. And that was why I did it the way I did it, because it was the most stress-free way to kind of get it going.
Yeah, it's a sweet, like the local environment that you've talked about is a real sweet spot between being broad enough that you can get that audience, and they connect with it in a way that feels personal, because it feels more intimate than a national show, but it's not so micro that it just seems chintzy. It's this weird sweet spot right in the middle that local TV really had for years and years and doesn't quite anymore. But to your point about the technology, every local station had to do a news broadcast, so they needed that stuff to do a professional news broadcast, but then it sat for the rest of the day. And it's like, George Romero, when they made Night of the Living Dead, that was all, they worked in TV news, filming TV news, so they had all the stuff.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I'm looking at the TV Guide and looking at the Mike Douglas show. I wanted to mention Mike Douglas show, which is a unique animal in that it was done in Philadelphia.
Yes.
And so it was, and basically their deal was when people were going to New York to publicize a movie, the Mike Douglas show would send a limo to your hotel in New York, pick you up, drive you down to the show in the morning, you do the show and get you back. So you didn't feel like you were leaving New York.
Right.
But they had their own really wonderful show that came out of Philly for years and years, was very influential and had a nice long life. And so that was another
national
example.
Show.
It was an example of a local show that was really truly national, and they syndicated it and figured out ways to sell it in all these markets. And it was a great show. I mean, it was really cool. And, it was amazing. A variety show that kind of most people watched it in the afternoon.
Yeah, it was like a talk show variety show. You'd have a panel of guests, or even like American Bandstand, which was filmed out of Philly for years.
Yeah, right. That's right. American Bandstand. That's right.
And they're making that out of Philly. It's insane.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to take up all your time because I know you got to go somewhere. Do you watch anything now? Are there comfort shows that you're watching in lockdown?
Oh, you know what I'm doing now is I'm doing my second pass through Breaking Bad, which I just can't get over how great it is.
Yeah, you're not alone. When I've asked this, that and Better Call Saul are the ones that people mention.
Yeah, I just can't believe how great it is. And I'm like in the fourth season and I'm just kind of going, it's just like taking a nice warm bath with killing.
Right, killing and crystal meth. That's the nice warm bath we all want to take.
Right.
Cool.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's been great talking to you.
Oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate it, Ken. Thank you, and good luck with the show. It sounds like it's a great idea, and I know you've been doing it for a long time, obviously. So,
thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. It's cool.
There you go. That's Joel. He's as Joel-y as Joel can be. Love talking to Joel. Really fun chat. That was a fun issue as well. I actually really enjoyed rereading that issue. That Isaac Asimov piece is pretty fantastic. And I'm a big Prisoner fan. Also, weirdly, I've been posting a bunch of episodes on YouTube, not video. I've just put stills on, but I know a lot of people sort of only consume stuff via YouTube. And in the lockdown, I've been watching a lot more YouTube, just to kind of see what's out there. And it's been fascinating. I've put up about 100 episodes, so it's about a little less than a quarter of the episodes of TV Guidance Counselor. And it's sort of random episodes, a lot of the music ones, because for whatever reason, those seem popular on there. But it's interesting to see which ones get a ton of views and which ones get, like, none. Some of my favorites haven't been that viewed, but it's people Googling and I guess just randomly finding this stuff, and it's pretty interesting. But my point is, as I've been re-editing them and remastering them to put them up on YouTube, I've been re-listening to them, and I never do that. I never re-listen to my episodes outside of the week or 2 weeks after I record it, and I'm editing it and doing this voiceover and all that kind of stuff. And it's been interesting. It's been nice in a lot of ways, because I'm like, oh, that was a pleasant chat, or oh, I can't believe I got to talk to that person. And also a little bit depressing, because I'm like, wow, I used to be good at this. Oh, there used to be people and I was funny and quick on my feet, and not anymore. As you can tell, I turned 40 this week, so that's rough. Actually, I'm thinking of just skipping it. I'm going to be 39 again and do 40 in 2021 if we all make it there. And if we do, let's just have a massive 40th party for me next year in 2021. We'll have, dancers and tents and bouncy castles and whatever indulgence that you can imagine. You shoot me an email. Let me know. If you also get an in on anything fun, like a water park that you own or something like that, let's start setting this up, because I need something to look forward to. And frankly, you do too, even if you didn't know it. Anyway, speaking of things to look forward to, I have a brand new edition next week, so I will be here, and I hope you will be here too, for that brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor.
This isn't a show for me. This is a show for you.